If I reflect all the way back to my teenage years, there was this drive in me to explore my own sexuality, my own pleasure, and to feel sexually empowered. And then coming into my early 20s, I started coming across new teachings. I attended different kind of workshops through my travels, kind of alternative ways of connecting to my body, and ended up having a big awakening where I realized that the way I'd been kind of pursuing my own sexual empowerment was actually quite disconnected from myself and my own body. And part of that was the discovering and the creation of products that actually supported that. One of the reasons why when women switch from vibrators to a non-vibrating pleasure wand, one of the reasons why that is such a significant experience for women is because when we slow down and actually start to presence them, it's like, wow, there's actually a lot of information that wants to be felt and met before our body can authentically open into deeper pleasure. One of the first practices that I invite women into is just called, I think there's this notion in the spiritual healing community of, feel it to heal it. We receive just, endless stories from women who work with the wands for dearmoring purposes, or just to start to experience slower self-pleasure that's more connected to themselves. One of my favorite stones to work with, particularly for a woman who is like in between relationships, or perhaps even going through a breakup, is one of the other like stronger and really popular stones is
Hey everybody, quick break on our episode to talk to you about our sponsor, My Libido Doc. One of the things that we truly believe is that great sex is available to everyone, but we just have to learn how. So head over to our site to get your free copy of our ebook, 5 Steps to Mind-Blowing Orgasms and Romance. Get the quick and easy tips to turn your sex life around, rev up your engines, and fall in deeper love and passion with yourself and your partner. So if you just go to mysexdoc.com, you will find that ebook there for download. Now back to our show. Hey everybody, I am so excited to introduce you to Courtney Davis. We are going to have a great show, and this show is going to be really targeting women, but also is going to be amazing for any male partners in their lives too, because you're going to learn a little bit more about how to really please the woman in your life. One of the things that we see so often is that women can hold emotions in their vagina and their cervix and their clitoris and all of their lovely, lovely, lovely erogenous zones. And with this, sometimes sex can be painful. Sometimes we can dissociate. Sometimes things can be numb. And oftentimes we are not told about this, and we're not told how to deal with these feelings and how to process through allowing our bodies to release these, allowing our bodies to actually experience the pleasure that we were born for. So this is why I invited Courtney to the show today. She's a sexual wellness entrepreneur, and she's a pioneer of the slow pleasure movement, which is amazing, right? Because one of the things I know I hear over and over and over again from women across the board is that it is too fast, that we need to slow down. So she's a pioneer of this movement, and she's also developed a ton of product lines, including the Wands Crystal Pleasure Wand. And I have one here today. She's going to show off a bunch for us as well. And we're going to talk about how this is different than classic dildos or vibrators and what it can actually help you do to bring more pleasure into your life. She has a ton of other cool products like the Free Bleed waterproof blankets, helping women to go through their menses without the use of uncomfortable and sometimes toxic pads and tampons, and so much more. So everybody, I am your host, Dr. Diane, the founder of My Libido Doc, and I am thrilled you're here with me today, everybody. And thank you, Courtney. I'm thrilled to have you as well. Thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to talk about all these juicy topics I talked about today. But before we do that, I want to hear a little bit about just you, because this is such an interesting company you own, right? You're making products and really supporting women, and in a kind of a different way than a lot of our traditional sex toy companies are doing. So how did you get involved in this super unique way of supporting females?
Um, yeah, I think, if I reflect all the way back to my teenage years, there was this drive in me to explore my own sexuality, my own pleasure, and to feel sexually empowered. Um, and initially that came with sort of images of what sexual empowerment looked like through the media and, Samantha Jones, that kind of thing. And so, initially it looked like using vibrators, buying my girlfriends all of their first vibrators, really being like an advocate for my own right and other women's right to pursuing their own pleasure. And that continued through my teenage years, even embracing like more promiscuous behavior and feeling a rightness in that in myself. And then coming into my early 20s, I started coming across new teachings. I attended different kind of workshops through my travels, kind of alternative ways of connecting to my body, and ended up having a big awakening where I realized that the way I'd been kind of pursuing my own sexual empowerment was actually quite disconnected from myself and my own body. So then came in a deeper journey of really learning what it meant to feel myself, to honor myself, and then to experience my sexuality from that place. And part of that was the discovering and the creation of products that actually supported that. So whereas vibrators and more conventional sex toys can be great, I still use them from time to time. I found that that was more so like this high stimulation, almost like chasing a feeling type experience. Whereas with the pleasure ones, like the one that you held up a couple minutes ago and the other ones that we offer, it's really about inviting women to slow down and connect with more subtle sensations, connect with where they are emotionally in the moment, and meeting their body and their deep tissues in a much more intimate way.
Yeah, it's so wonderful, and I really appreciate what you're saying around this, level of disconnection with this part of ourselves. What do you think is in and I, this is totally opinion, right? Because there's so many different people we see in the world that can help us with, with our sexual history. But with what you've seen in your work, what do you think some of the biggest things are that lead to a woman to be disconnected from her own body parts, like this, her own female anatomy? Like, why does this even happen? And how does a woman even know if this is happening to her?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just stems from like our lifestyle and society and the pace that we are living at. Like there's just not enough slowing down, presencing, really meeting ourselves where we are in the moment. It's a lot of like operating from sort of the vision of where we think we need to get to, as opposed to starting from where we are and then actually listening to the intelligence of the body. Like, what is the body asking for? Where is the body guiding us? There's a lot of sort of, living from the mental constructs and the patterns that we adapted and adopted to survive in given the conditions that we're all being brought up in. So I think, just basic like principles of how we've adapted to live the society that we're in is a starting point. And then from there is like we've internalized a lot of unhelpful ideas around sex. And I think that there's a very masculinized portrayal of female sexuality that also exists in the media, where women, we're watching porn or we're watching movies and we're expecting our bodies to respond in a certain way based on been shown. And a lot of us aren't even provided the idea that maybe that's actually not what our body wants. And that's not actually what brings pleasure. That's not what fulfills us. And that's not to say high stimulation, like high intensity experiences can't be fulfilling, but it's more so like, where is that experience arising from? Is it coming from a pattern and something you've just internalized, seeing it in the outside world, or is it arising from the true longing of the body?
Yeah, I think you bring up some really important points, and I've noticed in my own life, like around this, what we're talking about around, oh, there's just so much going on, and it's so easy to deprioritize pleasure. That one of the points I wanted to bring up is that this whole concept, right? I think it's like it's an evolution of like changing and relearning it over and over and over again. So it's like, oh, finally figure out how to like slow down and be more present and balance stress. And then all of a sudden, life kicks us into our familial patterns. And all of a sudden, we might feel that disconnection. And so, at least in my own experience, it's like this kind of this ebb and flow of like realizing, like, oh, I'm actually disconnected from my own body. And here's how to get back into it. And for me, one of the biggest triggers I notice is if I'm disconnected from my own body and I'm like not feeling, the pleasure, I'm not dropping into the sensations. Some of that is just realizing my mind wanders more. Some of it is realizing that I'm like snappier. Some of it is just this feeling of like ending every day with this statement of I'm so exhausted. And that's like a big key if I start saying that a lot, right? To trigger me into saying, well, you might not be fully in your body right now. So, and I bring this up because then, kind of the follow-up question for you is like, how do women and humans too? I mean, I think this applies to all humans. But how do we begin to realize like, okay, we are more disconnected and we are more disconnected to our pleasure centers? Because I think what can happen sometimes is we get into these habits and we get busy and we get overwhelmed. We start these new like paths. And then all of a sudden it's like 1 month, a quarter, a year goes by and we've been disconnected from our pleasure center this whole time and haven't even realized it. So have you seen anything that helps people kind of just realize this, like, wow, I'm disconnected. I'm not enjoying sensation. I'm not enjoying pleasure. And, maybe I'm like even completely, numb in my genitals and in my anatomy. What are like some of the key things that you have found to help women realize this, like, oh yeah, I need to do some of these practices to actually come home to myself again?
Yeah, I think unfortunately a lot of times it involves like symptoms getting to the point where women just can't help but start to look deeper. It's like extreme burnout or lack of fulfillment in their sex life or vaginal pain, pelvic pain. In a lot of cases, it is like a more extreme symptom that forces us to look deeper and have to explore something else. And, when it's a more subtle symptom, like maybe it's a lack of natural vaginal lubrication, like you're having trouble getting naturally lubricated, even though you're only 25 years old. It's easy to, to think, oh, maybe something's going, like dismiss it. Like maybe something's a little bit off with my hormones. Maybe I'm a little bit stressed. But it's like as the symptom gets stronger and stronger, we are faced with having to look at it and really uncover the root. So, yeah, I think the big in your face symptoms is certainly one of them. And then there's going to be people who are sensitive to a lack of fulfillment at earlier stages. For some people, they'll really feel like, man, I'm not sexually fulfilled here, or I'm not nourished here with whatever's going on in my life to the extent that I know I can be. And so then begins the investigation of that.
Yeah. So, and then my follow-up question of that is, okay, so somebody has gone through this, they realize that they are like disconnected. And one of the places, and really all places, we can store, I think, trauma and emotions and memory in all places. I think the pelvic floor is so interesting because in like chiropractic medicine, I'm not a chiropractor, but I'm a naturopathic doctor and we're trained in some chiropractic medicine. And in chiropractic medicine, there's this like kind of saying of like as above, so below. So what's happening in like the top of the spine and the top of the structure happens like really kind of like the opposite, like below in the pelvis. If we're talking about a problem in this example that arises in the jaw, then you will see that a similar type of pattern actually arise in the sacrum and the pelvis area. And this is like super interesting to me, medically speaking, when it comes to this concept of vaginal pain, because so many people walk around grinding their teeth, locked jaw, like, clenching, TMJ. It's such a problem. And then whatever's going on in the jaw is one of many things that can actually translate down to the pelvis. We wind up with our pelvic floor muscles tightening. We wind up with this, like the cervix and some of the muscles that are going into our vagina, that are going into our clitoris. All of these areas, they almost are like locked down, just like the jaw can. And I think this is one of the many reasons why people have things like pelvic pain and vaginal issues is because of that stress and everything you're talking about. And like literally we carry that in our musculature and in our ligaments. So one of the things that, has always interested me about the wands is this idea of dearmoring, of actually allowing these muscles and these ligaments and these tendons that tend to not only get tight to make us be in pain, but also store memories, also store stress, also store all of these emotions. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen, if you've seen anything like specifically around the concept of like, why like what does it look like for these areas to hold emotion, and what is the process of dearmoring to help these muscles actually release, and what have you seen with that?
Yeah, so when it comes to dearmoring, like there can be this deeper exploration of like deeper massage, really like working with the structure of the pelvis.
And Courtney, real fast before you go on, can you actually take a step back and explain to everybody what dearmoring means, because I think everybody might not know that term, so would you mind starting there?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so dearmoring comes from the notion that our tissue can armor itself as a way of basically protecting itself or holding emotion or information, unprocessed memories, that kind of thing. And so we are particularly prone to developing armor in our erogenous zones. And so with dearmoring, it's about working usually hands-on, more like deep physical, emotional, energetic meeting of the tissue to allow what is stored there to be released, to move. And so it's no longer being held there. It's no longer stagnant. It's no longer contributing to things like pain and numbness. And it's dearmoring is newer in the sense like, if you talk to most medical doctors, they're not going to know what it is or even know to suggest it.
Not a medical term.
But yeah, more and more women are waking up to it and developing a hands-on relationship with their own tissue and discovering how much is actually held there, and creating symptoms that medically or otherwise hard to explain.
Yeah, I love it. I love to, just try to find a scientific reason for everything. Not that there is one, but as much as possible, it really helps my brain get behind the understanding of this. So I've looked at dearmoring as almost like when we do like a trigger point massage, right? And one of the things that happens with trigger point massage is when we find these areas where there's maybe these what am I blanking on my words? But essentially where the fascia and the muscles kind of get tangled, almost like adhesions, right? So when we get these places, say in our quadriceps and our biceps, some of these other areas, the muscle will not function as well. And they hold a lot of stress, they hold a lot of trauma, but they basically are just uncomfortable. The muscle is not functioning. And when we do like a trigger point massage, what we're doing is few different things, but one of the things we're doing is bringing the brain's awareness of this tissue and what's going on to help with the healing. And that's sort of how I've looked at some of the process of dearmoring is like, okay, what we're doing in a way is similar to any other muscle in our body in many ways. Obviously, it's a little more sensitive and it's a little more erotic and all these other juicy, yummy things. But we're essentially allowing these the muscles and tissues to, like the neurological system, to find themselves better, and the muscles and tissues to process better and to move better and to function better and all those things, just like any other muscle. So what is the process then as far as dearmoring, as far as getting these muscles to function and bringing the awareness back and all this sort of thing? What is the process that you've seen with like the wand? And I know you have some wands there too, that is different than somebody, say, just using a traditional vibrator for something like this.
Yeah, so a traditional vibrator or just high stimulation contact like that is generally not going to create enough space to really presence whatever the information is that we're trying to contact. Like one of the reasons why when women switch from vibrators to a non-vibrating pleasure wand, one of the reasons why that is such a significant experience for women is because it no longer allows them to bypass a bunch of information that's there. Like with vibrators, we can just kind of drive ourselves with stimulation towards that peak pleasure experience. Whereas when we're actually slowed down with like a pleasure wand, contacting ourselves in the moment, it's like we're meeting much more of the information that's there, including.
Hey, everybody, quick break in our episode to talk to you about our sponsor, My Libido Doc. One of the things that we truly believe is that great sex is available to everyone, but we just have to learn how. So head over to our site to get your free copy of our ebook, 5 Steps to Mind-Blowing Orgasms and Romance. Get the quick and easy tips to turn your sex life around, rev up your engines, and fall in deeper love and passion with yourself and your partner. So if you just go to mysexdoc.com, you will find that ebook there for download. Now back to our show.
Boundaries, including, stored emotions, trauma, things that we may have experienced but kind of bypassed in the moment in our past. And then when we slow down and actually start to presence them, it's like, wow, there's actually a lot of information that wants to be felt and met before our body can authentically open into deeper pleasure. And
so in some way that, I'm sorry, please continue. Go ahead.
And so when, like, for women to begin the process of dearmoring, a lot of times, like, it's not even about moving towards deeper massage right away. It's like, can you actually just slow down, like place a hand on yourself, breathe, and meet what is here right now? And then we go deeper from there.
And then I'm curious what your process is. And I know, like we talked about, you have courses and all sorts of training materials for people. But kind of big picture wise, I'm curious what your process is if a woman is interested in trying this, because there can be so many, like you said, there can be so many emotions, right? And these areas, especially when we get into, certain parts of our vagina, and for a lot of women, their cervix, since we hold so many memories there, but also this is a part of the body that is not touched hardly at all. And so there can be so much just stuff there, right? Like you said, emotion stuff to process. And because of that, it can be a wild process sometimes of like, wow, why is this pain, or why is this numb, or why do I touch this place? And I immediately want to cry. And like you said, like get the information and what it's teaching us, which can be a wide variety of things. So how do you find in your process of going slow, since I know that's part of your process, how do you find that women should start with this in a way that when things come up, it's going at a pace that their nervous system can handle, and those kind of things? How walk us through kind of like the beginning part of the pleasure practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my coursework, and when I start to teach women how to go on this journey for themselves, we start really gently. Like before there's even physical hands-on touch, we are just simply bringing our awareness to our vagina, to the pelvic bowl. One of the first practices that I invite women into is just called yoni gazing. So it's the practice of sitting in front of a mirror and meditatively gazing at their vulva and just being with what arises. And a lot of times there's shame, there's all kinds of voices that come up just through that practice alone. And so, yeah, we start slowly just by starting to presence our attention on the vagina and the pelvic bowl. And then really titrating, where it's not about going in and like cleaning up all of the unprocessed information all at once. It's like, hey, let's go in, let's meet a couple of layers, and then let's take a break and allow the body and the whole nervous system to restabilize. I think there's this notion in the spiritual healing community of, feel it to heal it, and people want to feel it all the way through. And at the same time, if your approach is always trying to feel more so that you can come to completion and heal, it's like you're always going to find more to feel. So I'm not a huge advocate of like digging deeper and deeper and deeper. More so like, let's go in, feel a couple of layers, come out, stabilize, and then feel when that next natural wave comes of wanting to go deeper again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. That resonates with me so much, because I have found sometimes that when we just kind of get in this process, right, of like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, that alone can be dissociative. Like there's so many things that when there's so many like parts of processing that when something comes up, allowing the nervous system to, like you said, stabilize. And to me, that's like almost coming back into that parasympathetic, that part that is restful, where it's healing, where the nervous system is sending out the signals of safety. And if we're just pushing, 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 essentially, I think what we're doing is we're just allowing that stimulative, the sympathetic system to be moving so quickly. And that is like where we pop out of our body, right? When it's like so much, the body can't stabilize, using your words. And we tend to dissociate more easily and that sort of thing. So in this sort of practice then, have you seen, like, what have you seen as far as like healing occur with the wand? Like, have you seen things like pelvic pain completely disappear? Have you seen vaginal numbness disappear? Like, what other amazing kind of things have you seen from the use of your wands?
Yeah, I've seen so much of that, like just regularly, women having profound experiences right from oftentimes like the very first experience of holding their wand and sort of realizing the journey they're about to go on. It's like even that in itself is a big wake up for a lot of women. But yeah, we receive just, endless stories from women who work with the wands for dearmoring purposes or just to start to experience slower self-pleasure that's more connected to themselves. Pelvic pain, pussy pain, that's a huge one that we continuously receive testimonials of people healing and recovering and like completely from that, where through using pleasure wands and some of the practices that we teach, it's like such reconnection and like recognition of boundaries, desires, needs comes into place where the pain and the armoring that was there to sort of protect parts of themselves previously just gets to drop away and whole new levels of pleasure and sensitivity can come online. So yeah, pelvic and vaginal pain, that's a major one that shifts and heals completely for a lot of women through this work. But also just awakening new pleasure pathways like internal vaginal orgasms, so like a G-spot orgasm or a cervical orgasm, which may have felt completely out of reach for women, starts to become accessible or something that they just naturally find themselves experiencing after they have communed with our cervix more deeply and released the different layers of like numbness and pain there as well. And then I would also say just like more fulfilling intimacy. It's like when you're more connected with yourself, you're aware of what your body's asking for. You're aware of what a yes and a no feels like on subtler and subtler levels. Like that's going to lead you into more fulfilling intimacy with another person as well.
Yeah, and I can see all that, right? Like with the shape of it, you have like the natural part that's going to easily get to your G zone, but it's long enough, and because of the way it is shaped, you can get to so many different parts of our genitals and of our anatomy. So it leaves for the ability to be very, say, flexible and open with all the different tissue that it can actually touch and improve upon. And one of the things I wanted to touch on too today is in a lot of your wands, you're using different types of crystals, you're using different types of gemstones. And I think this is an important thing to talk about because, in the vibrator world, we talk about things like, okay, well, silicone tends to be a pretty safe toy from a standpoint of toxins, right? So, from a standpoint of standard vibrators, it's like, well, don't use the plastic. We don't want all those toxins in the vagina or in the anus or wherever people are using their toys. So we see that oftentimes from a toxin perspective with some of your standard vibrators. But I think a less common thing that, unless we look in like the jade egg world, which we've talked about on this podcast before, there's not the same level, I feel like, of conversation of, hey, using different types of gemstones in our toys. And so your wands are very, they're very unique that way. So what is it about these different gemstones that also aids in healing responses, and why might, women that are interested in this, why might a woman choose one particular gemstone to work with versus another? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So just as a starting point, when it comes to using pleasure wands and tools that are made of crystal, aside from the specific crystal properties of each, just using an object that is so beautiful and artfully designed, I think creates a powerful shift to begin with, as opposed to using like something that's made of silicone, maybe feels a bit more like clinical or medical in some way. Using crystal or glass as well tends to feel quite artful and beautiful. And that in itself sets the tone for engaging with ourselves in a more intentional way that's more self-appreciative and self-honoring. But when it comes to the crystals, so I've got a few here. I'll spin them to the screen. It really depends on sort of where the woman is at and what she's looking to shift in her physiology and in her emotional body. And so as a starting point, we always encourage women, like, just notice what you feel most drawn to. If there's a certain stone that really seems to call to you or you find particularly beautiful, you can just trust that. However, based on kind of what you're working with and where you presently are, we can also make recommendations. One of my favorite stones to work with, particularly for a woman who is like in between relationships or perhaps even going through a breakup, is clear quartz, because of how it is so clearing of the energetic field. Like, I've found when I work with clear quartz, there's a way that like foreign energies and things that I feel like are kind of clouding my own field in some way just dissipate, and there's an enhanced sense of feeling myself as separate from all of the other energies in my life. So for that reason, I might work with clear quartz. One of the other like stronger and really popular stones is black obsidian. It's known for being a particularly grounding stone. So I normally would not recommend black obsidian for a beginner unless you feel strongly called, because it is known for bringing more like trauma and dense emotions and things to the surface to be processed. So normally, if you're just starting to dip your toes into this work, I would recommend working with such a strong stone, just because it can be quite intense. But there is no wrong stone to start with. And the grounding energy of obsidian also can contribute with creating a feeling of safety in the body. And you're starting to work with some of this deeper information in your body. Rose quartz, super popular again. This is one of my favorite stones. I always return to it. I mean, women are often getting into this work because they want to deepen their connection with themselves, deepen self-love, self-acceptance, and that's what rose quartz is all about. So I would say it's a more gentle stone, and a lot of beginners start off with rose quartz. And another one of my favorites is amethyst, actually. There's something with amethyst that's very like emotionally soothing, calming. And so for women that experience a lot of anxiety with like even coming into connection with their body or with sexual intimacy, this can be a beautiful stone to work with. In that regard, a lot of beginners start off with those. And I encourage women not to think too much about the properties and really trust, like, what is your intuition calling you towards? What do you feel most drawn to? And in my experience, like, I obviously, because I own the company, I have many different wands and crystals at this point, and my experience is that I'll work a particular stone for some time, and then I just feel complete with it, and I move on to something else that calls me more.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I really appreciate all forms of energy in medicine, and subtle energy that we see in these stones. I think is more powerful than I think a lot of people give it credit for. I like, as you're talking, I'm reminded of a meditation, a visualization I did a while ago when I had broken up with a partner, and I was in the bathtub, just kind of like doing this cleansing type of meditation, right? Just try to release my energy from his. And all of a sudden I got this vision of this huge fire hose up into my yoni and like sucking out my life force. And so I did this whole thing with like pulling out this fire hose and releasing, et cetera, et cetera. And, and that felt really good. I have a girlfriend who had actually, when I was telling her this, had a similar type of experience. But for her, she was like also releasing a past lover. And there was like a hook. She said it was like this like ginormous hook that was energetically in her cervix. Obviously, we're talking, energetic hooks here for our listeners and not real hooks or fire hoses. But, the idea of this and then having that type of that frequency, right? Because I think this is what it is. It's like we leave that frequency, that imprint behind. And we see that, these crystals have their unique properties, their unique frequencies, their unique subtle energies. And so just, thinking through that process, and this was, before I knew about, the crystal wands out there, but I can imagine how healing, adding that layer to this type of practice could be when we are oftentimes storing those memories that don't even have to be necessarily trauma and could be, but oftentimes could be just like kind of that past, that frequency, that memory, that type of, say, energy that we're really just trying to release from a previous partner so that we can be more free and more in our individuality to go into our next relationship.
Yeah. And one thing that I do want to add, because not everyone listening is going to believe in crystal properties, and
Sure.
for some people it's not really within their kind of framework of the world. And so if that's you and you're listening, one thing to also know about the crystal wands is a lot of it comes down to intention. So it's like, what is the intention that you're using the wand for? How do you want to connect to yourself in the process? What are you working towards with it? And when you're really connected to that intention, that also enhances the transformation. So, if you look at a certain crystal, you find it beautiful, and then you learn that its properties are, enhancing self-love, enhancing self-acceptance. It's like, maybe in addition to relying on the crystal properties themselves to do that work, it's like your intention gets to come into play and you get to bring that into your practice.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. Well, I think that's about a wrap for today. And everybody, we are going to have links for you in the show notes about Courtney, about her businesses, about how to get these various wands, courses, etc. So we're going to put all of that in the show notes for you guys today. Courtney, is there anything before we sign off that you're like, we have to say this before we go?
I think just offering an invitation to women wherever you are on your journey, whether you're feeling inspired after listening to this to dive into like the deep work of dearmoring the vagina, or exploring slow pleasure practices, just an invitation to come into more connection with your pussy in general. And that can look like simply placing a hand on her and acknowledging her. And, the journey begins just simply by deciding that you want to have a relationship with your pelvic bowl.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And just reminding everybody that pleasure is your birthright, right? Pleasure is part of how we balance our body. Pleasure is a gift from God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call that energy. And it really is part of balancing your hormones, balancing your mind, becoming more intimate with yourself, your partner, and really beginning to heal or continuing to heal yourself in some of the deepest ways while also having a ton of fun. So thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of The Lounge. Again, you'll find Courtney's information in the show notes, and I will see you again really soon. Ciao for now. Thank you for listening to the Libido Lounge. Please don't keep me a secret. Please share this with your friends. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as how to work with me at mylibidodoc.com.